Okay, so now to shift into emergency preparedness, because that is the topic. Natasha and I always say that planning makes everything easier. And studies show, because Natasha and I are huge brain science nerds, studies show that preparing reduces stress and reduces anxiety. Because what's scary? The unknown, right? That unknown fear that you don't know what's happening. But when you take the time to come up with a plan and prepare, suddenly you don't feel stressed or anxious because it's not unknown. You've thought about things. That's what we're talking about today on the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, emergency preparedness. But first, I start out with some chit chat for one. Natasha's not with me this week, so it was just me talking about what was going on this week for me in terms of health and supplementing and my latest workout, and also talking about a comedy show that I saw and recommending that you all go see these two comedians that are hilarious on the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, which is starting now. Hello. Happy Thursday. Alegre here. I am solo. This will hopefully, not hopefully, this will definitely be my last solo day going on this month, because Natasha will be coming back from her silent retreat, which I can't wait to hear about. I wonder what she's going to tell us about her silent retreat. Sounds like a pretty fun experience, though. As a mom, sometimes just going to the shower can feel like a vacation. Taking a shower can feel like a vacation because no one's pulling on you or asking you to do something. And so I'm sure a 2-week silent retreat must just feel so peaceful. So I can't wait for Natasha to get back and tell us all about it. In the meantime, I am Allegra, one half of Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, or BYWD, as we call ourselves. And we are the authors of these 4 short read books. This one is our bestseller and was a bestseller. 3, 2, 1 Done, 3 Simple Steps to Get Your To-Do List Done. All of these books are workbooks because Natasha and I know, with our decades of instructional and educational background, both of us are educators, we're coaches. I am a public speaking coach. Natasha is a voice coach. From our decades of coaching, we know that people learn better when they do. And so all 4 of these books are short reads. You can read them in about an hour, and you can do the exercises in them in about an hour, so that you can immediately start implementing the things that we talk about there. And to get our books, go to, if you can find everything on our website, bywdreams.com. Today, our topic is creating a family emergency plan. And when Natasha's here, usually we do a little bit of chit chat and then we get into the topic. However, I am alone, as you can see. And so I am unable to do a chit chat. However, I do have some things on my mind. So I am just going to start with that, I guess, today. So I have been listening to a really interesting book called Body by Science. And by the way, if you sign up for our newsletter at bywdreams.com, you will get the links that you need to find all of the books that we reference or any other references that we might mention. And today there are definitely going to be some, because we're talking about family emergency plan. And I have some amazing resources for you that I actually just learned about yesterday, because I am active in the emergency preparedness community in my municipality. And they actually had a meeting where I live in Los Angeles. It's called CERT training. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. That's right. And so my husband and I have taken part in multiple CERT trainings, which are totally free at a certain level. And then you can go like the higher levels, where basically you can get like EMT training, and those cost money. But the introductory CERT training is totally free. So I definitely recommend that you look into whatever training might be available in your municipality, because the reality is that if there is an emergency in your neighborhood, more likely than not, it's your neighbors who are going to help you, because all the emergency services like fire trucks and EMTs and law enforcement, they're going to tend to go more towards like government centers or maybe universities or wherever there's like a big concentration of important buildings and stuff like that. And if you just live in an everyday neighborhood, it's really your neighbors. Actually, a statistic I heard last night was something like if you are in danger by an emergency, you have a 93% chance that it's a neighbor who's going to help you versus paid law enforcement or emergency response or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but rewind. Let's talk about something that I experienced this week and I thought was really interesting. And so I want to share with you. If you have listened to us before, then you know that I'm really into health, all things health. In fact, I'm trying out a new coconut creamer called salted caramel. And it's sweetened with stevia, which I'm not a huge fan of stevia, but if it's not too much, I like it. So I'm drinking not coffee, I'm drinking actually a mushroom hot chocolate blend that I make myself. So it has chocolate in it, it has ashwagandha, turmeric, a little bit of pepper because pepper activates turmeric. It has lion's mane, reishi, and cordyceps. And then on top of it, I added this coconut blend, this coconut, like kind of like a creamer. And it also has grass-fed collagen in it. So grass-fed collagen, salt, it's a lot going on, but it tastes yummy. So I am always trying new things. I'm really into supplementing because, and by the way, I was not into supplementing really until, so I'm 50. I turned 50 this year. Woo woo! Let's hear it for people who are 50. Oh, feel free to chat in the comments, by the way. Okay. I don't know, this person, patriots, and all sorts of weird things happening it on the on the on the chat. But anyway, so yeah, I'm super interested in I love learning about health and supplements. And so I'm reading a really interesting book called Body by Science, which is all about how long sustained low impact cardio does not have the aerobic benefits that you think. And the they talks about how important it is for you to get to really muscle failure and how to do that. And so today my experiment was that I was going to take the workout that I do regularly. So I like to do Alegre Pilates. And if you've never heard of Alegre Pilates, Alegre is a method of Pilates that is basically more like weight training than traditional Pilates. If you're expecting regular Pilates and you go into a Alegre class, you are going to be maybe scared uh, because it is intense. And I love this workout because it allows you to really, really focus on whatever muscles you're using because of the fact that you're laying down versus, traditional weight training, you're usually standing up. Although there are some like leg curls and leg presses, you might be sitting or lying down. But in Legree, they put the lights really low and you have you might be holding onto a strap or you might be just using like a traditional Pilates board where you're just kind of moving yourself back and forth, except that there's springs attached to it that are quite heavy. I think there's a maximum of maybe about 150 pounds on the springs because there are two kinds of springs. Some are 8-pound springs and some are 30-pound springs. And I think there's about 150 total pounds that you can load up onto your Pilates platform. Anyway, it is a super intense workout, but the whole Body by Science book talks about how if you're not pushing yourself to failure, then you're never going to see improvements in your body or changes in your body, I should say, because our bodies adapt to whatever it is that you do. And if you're doing something that isn't challenging to you, then your body's like, well, I already know how to do this. So, for instance, you jog for 20 minutes. No, your body's like, I already know how to do this and I don't need to change anything in any way. I don't need to build any muscle. I don't need to improve your lung capacity because we already know how to do this. And so the reality is if you want to improve lung capacity or if you want to improve your heart or if you want to build muscle, what this book says, right? I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but this book is written by a medical doctor. Let me just grab the name for you all. So it's called Body by Science, a research based program for strength training, bodybuilding, and complete fitness by Dr. Doug McGuff. And as I said, sign up for a newsletter at bywdreams.com and you will get links to all these things. So anyway, I decided in my Alegre Pilates class to really push myself to not sort of go into autopilot and just coast, but to really focus on like squeezing the muscles and listening to the instructor and just following her instructions as well as I can and just really making it hard on myself and getting to muscle failure as fast as I could. And so the fascinating thing is I wear a Fitbit and so I'm able to see the actual numbers generated by my exercise to see my how my heart rate is affected and to see how I've exerted myself. And so I took a class today and I compared the numbers to a similar class that I took recently. And I got almost 40% more exertion in terms of my heart rate peaking out. And so that was a really cool validation for me about what this doctor is talking about because I definitely felt my muscles were working harder. I was out of breath faster and I feel like I'm going to get some really cool gains, which that's what it's all about. You exercise some of it, of course there's some exercise that you do just for fun. For instance, I play soccer and I play soccer for fun. And yes, it's good for my overall fitness in many ways. However, this more strategic, targeted, focused, working to failure type of exercise has a specific purpose as well. And so I know I'm going to feel gains from this because I can just feel how I was wiped out after this class, and I was also hungry after this class, and I could just feel the difference in my muscles, so it'll be fun tomorrow. I'm definitely gonna have to do some stretching tonight. I don't know about y'all, but now that I am older, hydration and tightness are issues in a way that they never were before. I've always been kind of a flexible person, but definitely in the last decade I've noticed that my muscles, and probably it's not just my muscles, probably it's also my fascia, basically, are less hydrated and therefore tighter. And, I was one of those people who was like, stretching, who needs to stretch? Let's go. And I never seemed to get injured and, that sort of thing. But now I really notice I really have to stretch. I really have to pay attention to my hydration and my electrolytes. There's an electrolyte drink in here because I was sweating my booty off in that class. I mean, just dripping. I always take a rag with me. Well, not a rag. It's like a washcloth, right? I always take a washcloth with me because I drip sweat so much that I need to just like wipe it away. Yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, that was really a fun, experiment looking at my Fitbit numbers and seeing how it was different. And also today I'm going to really have to be good about my hydration and my stretching because when you load up your muscles and you get that lactic acid burn, you have to work it out. It doesn't just flush out on its own. So I'm really going to work on making sure to flush that out so that I don't have, the pain in my muscles tomorrow. So that's what's been going on with me. One other thing that's been going on with me is for those of you who follow my Instagram. So I have a separate Instagram. It's alegreramos.com. You can look it up. I also do stand-up comedy for fun. And I went to a great show this week. It was at this new place in Hollywood called the Kookaburra Lounge. Highly recommend it. So, so cool. And again, I'll put all of the links for this in our newsletter. If you go to bywdreams.com and sign up, you'll get all the links. So, really cool place, woman owned, very woman focused performance space. So beautiful. It's like pink and green florals and all of this emerald green velvet with gold accents. Really just gorgeous, gorgeous place. And I went to see a show and there was a drop in. So there's a drop in is someone who's unexpected who shows up. And usually it's someone kind of famous because that's how they get to drop in. Otherwise, they're the comics who are supposed to go on. And then sometimes you get these surprise comics. And these two ladies I thought were the best comedians of the evening. They are known as I Mom So Hard. That's the name of their comedy duo-ship. They're two moms, best friends. They are hilarious and they are on tour. So, by the way, one of my comedy writing buddies is a 23-year-old woman, and she was there with me. And so let me tell you, she agreed with me that they were the best comedians of the night, and she's, 23. Like, having kids, getting married is so far from her mind. These ladies are hilarious. So, I Mom So Hard. Their website is imomsohard.com. Again, this will be in the newsletter as well. But they are on tour. They are going all over Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, Nebraska, all over Arizona, New Mexico. Go see them. They are hilarious. Highly, highly recommend. So that's what's been going on with me. And hey, that's my chit chat for today. Okay, so now to shift into emergency preparedness, because that is the topic. Natasha and I always say that planning makes everything easier. And studies show, because Natasha and I are huge brain science nerds, studies show that preparing reduces stress and reduces anxiety. Because what's scary? The unknown, right? That unknown fear that you don't know what's happening. But when you take the time to come up with a plan and prepare, suddenly you don't feel it's not unknown. You've thought about things. In fact, I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy. If you haven't looked into Stoic philosophy, and maybe I don't know, for people who are not don't have a spiritual practice, I really feel like Stoic philosophy is a wonderful philosophy because it's not religious at all. I say that with a caveat because I have heard that originally Stoicism had a religious background, like way back when it was created. But when you read it as a modern person, it reads as straight philosophy. Doesn't feel like there's anything mystical in it. And a Stoic practice is actually to think about the worst thing that can happen. Because when you think about what's the absolute worst thing that can happen, you realize, oh, well, I guess that's not such a big deal because I have these resources that I can lean on, whether they're your own resources, right? Like I could figure this out, or if you have friends or family that you could lean on, you realize, oh, okay. So if the worst thing happens, I know what I'm gonna do. That just reduces stress and reduces anxiety. So I am a huge fan of emergency planning for just this reason. It is really good for reducing stress and anxiety. And also, too, it is important to communicate with your loved ones. Hey, here's what we should do in emergency, because if an emergency happens, what's your first thought? Oh my gosh, where are my kids? Where's my mom? Where's my sister? How am I going to communicate with them? What are we going to do? Are they okay? It's hard to think about anything else when you're worried about people that you love. And so communicating with your family now and saying, hey, here's what we're going to do in an emergency helps to ease that stress too, because then you know that you'll be able to get in touch with those people because you all have a plan. And then that's going to make it easier to weather whatever it is that you encounter, whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake or a tsunami. Now, that being said, I have done decades of emergency prep training and preparing, and I'm going to try and break it down in a way for those of you who maybe haven't done any. Okay, so for the complete beginner. However, I do want to say that because I live in earthquake country, there may be some things that I talk about that are more important for earthquakes than any other type of natural disaster, because that's what my knowledge base is based on. I don't have experience with tornadoes. I have a little bit of experience with tsunami warnings, not tsunamis themselves. And hurricanes, yeah, hurricanes kind of related to tsunamis because I have family in Hawaii. So that's where that experience comes from. But I've actually never experienced a tsunami or hurricane myself. So, with that caveat, let's get into creating a family emergency plan. So, the first thing I want to say is that I think about emergency preparedness as a 3-step process. And the first step takes up time, but doesn't cost almost anything. It's pretty much free. Okay, so it's just time that you're investing here. And by the way, we're heading into right now as I'm recording this, it is September 19th. We're heading into what is a holiday season for many Americans, whether it's Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or Christmas, whatever it is that you're celebrating the holidays. Personally, I think the holidays are a great time to be thinking about emergency preparedness because your family's going to come together. And in fact, my family once did an emergency planning meeting before Thanksgiving dinner because I said, "Hey, y'all, we're all together. Let's do this thing." Okay, so stage 1 is lots of planning. So it takes time, but it doesn't cost a lot of money. Stage 2 requires a little more money because in stage 2, what you do is you put together supplies. And stage 2 can go on for a long time because, in my opinion, you need supplies wherever you are spending 4+ hours a day. So, in my family, we have supplies in our car, at our place of work, and in our home because we might be in any of those 3 places when an emergency hits. The third stage is so stage 2 requires money and a little bit of time, but mostly money. And you can do that in long stages. Stage 3 is pretty much all money, but it is sort of your bigger ticket items, which I will talk about when I get to that stage. Okay. So 3 stages, and they start out really time intensive, but not expensive. And then they increase in money, but they decrease in terms of the amount of time that it'll take you to do them. So let's start with stage 1. Let me just go to the notes that I took last night because I want to include those. Okay, so stage 1 is planning. And this is where you sit down with your family and you discuss, what are we going to do in an emergency? How are we going to be in contact with each other? Where are we going to meet up? And what you want to think about here. So there are some basic tips in terms of being in communication with people. First of all, there is the standard belief that if you are on the same mobile network, cellular network for your phones, that it will be easier to contact each other if you are on the same network. And the second commonly held belief is that texting might be available when calling is not. The third belief around communication is that it might actually be easier to call people out of state than to call people within the area that you are situated in. Because if there's an emergency in your area, let's just say Los Angeles, because I'm in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, all the cell towers might be getting used, but I might be able to call someone in New York because that's going to be transferring to some other cell towers. So those are commonly held beliefs around communication. So what does that mean? One, you as a family should talk and know which network each of you are on. And if you're all on the same network, great. And what I recommend doing is creating a little wallet size card. In fact, I have one right here. Here is a little wallet size card that I created for my family. And I made one for everyone. And on one side, so I'll just read it to you. And this, again, if you go to bywdreams.com, I will include this in our newsletter so that you don't have to recreate this from scratch. So on the back, it says, if we can't reach each other, out of town calls may still be possible. Once you are in a safe place, check in with first person. And then it's the name and the number and the email of a friend of mine who is out of state. And then there's a second person, name, number, email again. And I just realized that I need to update these cards because these people's email addresses have changed since I made these cards. Okay. Then it has all of my family, all of our immediate family who live locally. It has all of our names and phone numbers and which cellular network we are on. And again, I now need to update this because the cellular network has changed. So, hey, see, I'm glad that I'm doing this to remind me I need to update my emergency card. And then below that, it has some very basic information. Remember, 911 for emergencies. Okay, that might seem really obvious, but the thing is when you're scared, you're stuck in a part of your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is where fight, flight, freeze happens in your brain. The front of your brain is your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex. And the thing is these two parts of your brain, only one of them can be on at a time. So when you're scared, you're not thinking properly. And that's why we have information as simple as remember 911 for emergencies. Now, who knows if you're going to be able to get through on 911, but the reminder is there because you might be stuck in your amygdala thinking like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And that's why I made these cards. And for those listening to the podcast, I am holding up a credit card sized card that I made for every member of my family. I typed up some stuff and then I laminated it at my local office supply store. And I cut them up so that everyone in my family has one to keep in their wallet. And why is that? Because again, in an emergency, you might not be thinking clearly. You might not remember, oh, what is so and so's phone number? I don't remember. Oh, what's the first thing we're supposed to do? And so that's why this card is there to jumpstart people's thought process. I mean, I haven't looked at this card in years, but I knew where it was. I knew exactly where to grab it. I didn't actually plan this beforehand. I just remembered, oh wait, my card is right here because I've always kept it in my wallet. So there's also the basic information that I said to you. Same network cell phones are more likely to work with each other. If cell phones don't work for calls, texting may still work. Oh, and this is an important one, although many of us no longer have this resource. Landlines might work when cell phones don't work because landlines have their own electricity source, right? If a cell tower goes down or if your battery is dead, landlines are on a different network and they have their own electricity source. So they might work in an emergency. However, lots of us don't have landlines is the problem. But again, I put that there as a reminder. Then on the other side, I have basically the steps you should do as soon as an emergency hits. And these are going to sound very basic. But again, the purpose of this card is to help my loved ones know what to do when they might not be thinking clearly. So on the other side, it says, grab a flashlight or light stick and shoes from under your bed, duck and cover under a solid piece of furniture away from glass or in an interior hallway. Again, this is all earthquake focused. So just a reminder, this might be different. It might be different instructions that you would give if it was a tsunami or hurricane or tornado. These are all based on the possibility that the emergency is going to be an earthquake, the probability. So duck and cover, solid piece of furniture away from glass or in an interior hallway. Now, the reason why I say away from glass is because in an earthquake situation, the number one source of injury is from flying objects and broken glass. So that's why we say away from glass. Second instruction, do not switch on lights until you are sure there is no gas leak. If you smell gas, shut off the gas. Now, the reason why is because the second cause of injury and damage to property is from fires that are started because someone switches on the light when there's a gas leak. That little spark of switching on a light will cause a fire. That is why you use things like chemical light sticks or flashlights. Okay, third instruction, turn off water to your house to keep it clean and potable. That's because if you need water and you have a water heater, your water heater is an excellent source of drinkable water. However, you need to shut it off from the main line in order to make sure it is clean. And then turn off electrical breakers, the individual ones first, and then the main breaker. Okay, so these are all just basic instructions that I'm telling to people. The water heater is a good source of drinking water. Stay where you are if it's safe. You may want to go to a nearby park because nothing can fall on you there. But each of us call the out of town contact so that someone knows you are safe. If you can't get a hold of anyone and it's not safe where you are, head to this address. So again, this is our family agreeing that we're going to stay where we are if it's safe. But if we're not safe there, then we're going to all meet up at this address. Leave a note under your doormat saying where you've gone. If you're passing by this other family address, stop there and leave a note in the message drop space saying the day and time, where you're going, your condition, and anything else important. And then it lists where these message drops are for each of our addresses. Okay. Again, if you go to bywdreams.com, I will send you all of this language so you don't have to recreate it yourself. So these are just basic plans that your family is coming up with. Where you're going to meet if you're not safe where you are, where the message drops so that everyone knows where everybody is, and who are the out of town contacts that you should all call to let them know that you're okay if you can't get in touch with each other. So you see, this costs like no money to make, but it's going to take a little bit amount of time, communication, and planning for your family to figure out what to put on this card based on what your emergency is that you might have to deal with. Okay. Now, related to this first step. So, again, we're in step number 1, which is all about planning and communication. Doesn't cost a lot of money to do this. In addition to coming up with this little card, you need to know how to work all the things that I mentioned in these steps that you do. So, for instance, if you smell gas, shut it off. Do you know where your gas meter is? Do you know how to turn it off? I have a gas shutoff tool that is zip tied to my gas meter, and I know how to use it. So practice turning off the gas, turning on the gas, if that's something that you can do for yourself. I don't know if every gas meter can do that. I know with my gas meter, I know how I can do that. And you should also, if you live in a community where your neighbors' homes are close together, you should also know where your neighbor's gas is. And if they have what's called, at least in California, in earthquake country, we have things called emergency shutoff valves that are mandatory. You have to put these on. If you live somewhere where these are not required, it's a good and expensive thing to put on because the danger of fire after something like an earthquake is there's a high risk of that. And so I know which of my neighbors have emergency shutoff valves and which don't. Actually, both of them do now at this point. But at one point, one of them did not because it was an elderly couple who had lived in their home since before emergency shutoff valves were required. So know where your gas is, know how to shut it off, install an emergency shutoff if you can, and check your neighbors that you know if you can do that. And then if you can, get a gas shutoff tool. I think they're really inexpensive. You can get them probably less than $10. Again, I will put this all in our newsletter that goes out, and you can get one for yourself and then just zip tie it to your gas meter or, maybe wire You might not want to use a zip tie if you don't have something to cut it with. So maybe just use a wire tie or something like that. Okay. Next, shut off the hot water heater. You need to know where's your hot water heater and how to shut it off. And then electrical breakers. Practice turning your electrical breakers off. Individual first and then the main, and then the reverse for turning them back on. Because if you need to deal with these things, you want to know that you want to feel confident that you can do it safely without causing a problem. And you don't want that to be an emergency situation. You want to do that now when you feel nice and calm, and then you'll know you can do it in an emergency. Okay. So, the final step of step one. So, step one is you've come up with you've come up with a plan with your family. You've created these little cards that you keep in your wallet. See, here's my wallet. It lives right here. The second step is know how to turn off and on all the things that are mentioned in that plan. The third thing is grab some basic supplies and keep them close under your bed. Okay. So I have a pair of old tennis shoes, some goggles, a face mask, and a hard hat. The hard hat I got at CERT training. As I mentioned, I did CERT training, which CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. I did CERT training in my municipality. See if there's some sort of CERT or emergency preparedness training in yours. I actually got this hard hat for free at a training. And so everyone in my family has a hard hat, an old pair of tennis shoes, goggles, and a mask. Just a paper mask under our beds. Because in the event that there's a really bad earthquake, there might be a lot of rubble. There might be a lot of dust in the air. It might be hard to see and to breathe. And there might be glass on the ground. And so these are the basic things you'll need in order to get away from your situation. And so grab those things and put them under your bed. And then once you have all this in place, you need to occasionally with your family run an emergency drill. Say to them, hey, it starts shaking right now. What do we do? You have to make sure, hey, everyone in your family knows that if you're at your house when the shaking starts or whatever emergency starts, where are you going to go? So, again, I'm in Los Angeles. The most likely emergency is going to be an earthquake. We know that there's an interior hallway. There's no glass in that hallway. I've removed any glass. There's some paintings on the wall, but there's no glass, no frames with glass in that wall because I don't want that broken. And also, all of the frames are hung on earthquake safe hangers, which have this like zigzag pattern so that if the frame jumps up and down, it won't fall off the wall. It's secure on the wall. So we know that if there's an earthquake while we're at home, we'll meet at this interior hallway and we'll wait out the earthquake. And then once the earthquake's over, we will then execute the rest of our emergency preparedness plan with regards to the rest of our family, our extended family. So occasionally at dinner, you might say, "Hey, there's an earthquake. What do we do?" And everyone in the family needs to say the same thing. Like, we go to this place and we do this thing and we grab our shoes or whatever. Whatever you have agreed upon as your plan. You're going to have to test it out so that it's second nature for people when such an emergency happens. Okay? So that's all of step 1. Step 2 is when you start buying supplies for the different places that you're spending a lot of time. As I mentioned, we have supplies at our place of work, at our home, and in our car, because those are the 3 places where we are mostly. And at the basic, you want to have the same thing that you have under your bed, right? You want to have some tennis shoes, face mask, goggles. You might want a hard hat. Chances are, if you're in your car, you're probably not going to need a hard hat, but you might want other things beyond these basic things, okay? And so let's just think this through. So, by the way, the tennis shoes thing is really important to have at your place of work because most of us do not wear shoes that you can walk miles in to work. And so, let's say you work in a downtown area and there's an emergency that happens and you might have to walk to your home. You want to make sure you have a pair of shoes that you can walk that distance to get home in. Okay. Now, the other thing to consider in your emergency preparedness packs, or some people call these bug out bags, In your bug out bag, you want to make sure that you have things that are appropriate to your climate. So for instance, I live somewhere where it is mostly hot. So I do put sun hats in all of our bug out bags because the chances if you're walking, you're going to be walking in sun are very high. Okay? Other things you might want to include, flashlights, water, maybe some energy bars, so some very basic things. The point of the bug out bags that are in your car and in your place of work are basically to get you to the safe place that you've agreed upon in your emergency plan. Okay, so think about it that way. Think about it like kind of like a long hike, probably is what we're thinking about it as. So again, this doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money. You might be able to gather some of these things, just every time I buy a new pair of tennis shoes, I would put the old pair of tennis shoes into a bug out bag. That's how I built all of our bug out bags. The other thing that you can do is, hey, if you're in a buy nothing group, which I'm a huge fan of buy nothing groups are community based Facebook groups where people give away things that they can no longer use. If you see some gently used tennis shoes, a baseball cap, maybe a pair of leggings and a shirt or a pair of sweatpants, you know, you can grab those gently used items and throw those in your bug out bags. Also, maybe people are giving away backpacks because their kids outgrew their backpack and they need one. You could start with free backpacks that way and build your bug out bag from there. Now, there's a great resource, and I'm going to share it to people in the newsletter. It's from the Red Cross. It's called 21 Weeks to Prepare. So, if the thought of creating a bug out bag on your own is overwhelming, you can spend the money and just buy pre-made bug out bags. There are companies out there who make $80, $100, $200 bug out bags, and you can just buy them. You can just throw money at the problem. Easy breezy. If you do that, go through the bags. Don't just own the bags and never look at them. Go through them so that you become familiar with what's in them. You might want to add to them. Some nice things to add is I put pictures of our family in all the bug out bags because it's important to, keep your spirits up and seeing your family. I also put a pack of cards in bug out bags because, you might just be sitting around and you might want to play cards with somebody. So I do little things like that. So customize it, make it your own. But yeah, you can just go out and buy a bug out bag. But if you don't know where to start, then this Red Cross uh, piece of paper, this Red Cross 21 weeks to prepare. And by the way, I have it in English and in Spanish. It guides you through the process of creating these emergency preparedness bags over the course of 21 weeks. So it says something like week 1, buy a pack of saltines, a jar of peanut butter, and a baseball hat and put that aside. Week 2, buy this. So just in a very slow, leisurely, unrushed, inexpensive method talks you through creating these bags. Now, try, I started with things when I started creating my bug out bags. I just started creating them based on, backpacks we already had, shoes that were no longer comfortable for exercise but were fine to still walk in, you know, going through my closet and saying, "Oh, here's a long sleeve shirt and a pair of pants that I don't wear anymore, so it's going to go in my bug out bag." So basically really cost no money, but as you add more things, like maybe you add a headlamp or you add a crank radio, right? So a radio that is powered by you cranking it, or maybe you add a water filtration device. The money can add up. So I do recommend doing it in stages because it can feel overwhelming. So just, you know, I like this 21 weeks idea because once you get into the habit of kind of just adding to your emergency preparedness, you can just continue with that and say, okay, now I'm going to get a tent and now I'm going to get some really light sleeping bags and you can just slowly add to your kits. It took me years to build out our at home bug out bag, which is kind of a more serious bug out bag because it does have a tent and sleeping bags and a crank radio and water filtration. It does have things like that in it, like true emergency, like we might have to leave the house kind of emergency things in it. But I did it over a long period of time. So Be prepared for this to be just kind of an ongoing thing that you do until you get to a point where you say, "Okay, I feel done." Okay? So that's stage 2 is building these bug out bags. And the hardest thing with the bug out bags is really the water, if you think about it, because water is heavy. 1 liter weighs 2.2 pounds. I know this because I recently did a backpacking trip. So water can be heavy. And so, you can buy a limited supply of emergency water, which is water that comes in a sealed foil packet. And the foil is really heavy duty so that it can't be easily punctured. But it's a good idea to have, a handful of those sealed water packets in each of your bug out bags because if you do have to go on a hike to meet up with your family, you're going to need water, especially if you're somewhere where it's a hot climate. Okay. Then your the third step, so first step was the planning and communication, as I mentioned. Second step is building the bug out bags. The third step is kind of these like bigger ticket items that you might want to invest in around your home. So, for instance, you might want to get some sort of generator. I have it's called a solar generator, but that's not a really good term for it because really it's just a very efficient battery that I can charge with these mobile solar panels. So that's what we have to keep our refrigerator running, to charge our phones, to charge our headlamps, that sort of thing in an emergency. So if power goes out, and we actually got to test it 2 years ago, my mom's power went out and she has an electric gate and she couldn't open the gate because the power had gone out. And so we took our battery over there and, again, I'll put the brand that I like and everything in our newsletter. Sign up at bywdreams.com. But we hooked it up to this battery and we were able to open her gate. And so that's you might wanna invest in something like that to stay at home. Some other things you might wanna invest in, we in our household, when we replaced the windows, I spent a little bit more. I think it cost about 10% more to get every single window tempered. So, tempered glass is glass that breaks into small pieces that are not sharp, like the safety glass in your car. Because of the fact that the number one cause of injury is flying objects and broken glass, I felt like that was a really important investment. And it's not required by building code where I live in order that you have to temper every single piece of glass. You have to temper certain types of glass, like glass where that gets like if you have a big patio door, you have to temper that because the glass reaches close to the floor. But I decided to spend the 10% more and get all of the windows tempered because we don't live in a big house. And there are windows all over the place. In fact, there's a window right above our bed. So I wanted to know that if that window broke, it was not going to break into shards that were going to be dangerous. So those are kind of the big ticket things that I put in category 3 of emergency preparedness. So look at your home, think about the things that you could purchase that would make your house safer both during the emergency. So, for instance, if you live somewhere with tornadoes or hurricanes or tsunamis, you might need a safe space to retreat to, some sort of storm shelter. So that could be a step 3 sort of thinking where we're gonna set money aside in order to build a storm shelter for the possible emergency. The generator that I mentioned, that's something that could be in stage 3. Stage 3 could also be, like, reinforcing your foundation in some sort of way. So stage 3 is really just all about money and having the wherewithal to go through these, making these improvements to your home because the reality is that the conventional thinking is that if there's an emergency, you're probably going to be sheltering in place since most of us spend at least a third of our lives at home, right? Because you're asleep for 8 hours a day hopefully, and that's at home. And so between that and working from home, most likely you're going to be at home during an emergency. And so That's why you might want to make these big improvements to your house, because the likelihood of being at home in an emergency is very high. And also, the conventional thinking with emergency preparedness is that in the event of a major emergency, you should be prepared to provide for your family for 3 weeks without assistance. So that's 3 weeks worth of water, 3 weeks worth of food, 3 weeks worth of whatever power you might need. And in terms of water, the food is not such a big issue because you can get high calorie food in a small container. But water, you might need as much as a gallon per person per day, depending on how hot it is. And then also taking into account any pets that you might have, additional water. The water really adds up. So becoming, knowing that you have the emergency water supply in your hot water heater, pool water is not a good source of drinkable water. It is a last resort, and you have to go through many purification methods to figure that out. Check that out. And so doing these sorts of home improvements are important because you'll probably be at home and you need to be prepared for 3 weeks with food, water, and energy. And that's why having solar powered or wind powered batteries are beneficial, because if you have a gas generator, you might run out of gasoline unless you have enough on site, in which case, fine. But, we're talking about energy to power our most basic things, like maybe a refrigerator or maybe a fan. If you live somewhere where it's really hot and we all, you need to keep your body temperature down, and powering things like communication tools and radios and that sort of thing. So that is step number 3, where it's really just all about money and it doesn't take so much time to organize those things. So, brief recap in terms of creating a family emergency plan. I think of it in 3 steps. Step 1 is the communication and planning around how will we react when the emergency happens, and how will we meet up with each other and check in with each other as soon as the emergency is over. That costs almost no money, but it takes some time. Step 2 is about creating these bug out bags. Eventually, you want to get to the point where you have a bug out bag for your home, for your office, for your work, and the ones home, office, work, home, car, work. And ideally, the work and car ones are really just about getting you to where you need to go to meet up with your family, as discussed in Plan 1. The home bug out bag and kind of bleeds over into step 3, which is about making your house as emergency improved as possible, because you might have to shelter in place for 3 weeks. And you want to just make your house as safe and work as well as it can in order to provide you with the food, the water, and the energy that you need for 3 weeks, just in case you're not able to get any help before that time. So I know that was a lot of information. Creating a family emergency plan is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't feel overwhelmed. Just get into action mode. If you aren't sure where to start, I recommend starting here. Pick a day that you and your family are going to get together, and your extended family are going to get together and talk about how will we communicate with each other and create that emergency plan, and then get it onto the wallet card that I showed you at the very beginning. Start there. Just set a meeting. You got to start somewhere. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to include this resource from the Red Cross, 21 Weeks to Prepare. Excellent resource. That would be step 2. Just go through that 21 weeks thing. It'll be a nice, light, and easy way to get the momentum of emergency preparedness going and making it a habit for you and your family. Thank you so much for joining me today. Natasha will be back next week. I can't wait to hear all about her silent retreat. I don't think I've ever really talked to someone who's gone on a silent retreat this long. So I'm excited to hear what sort of epiphany she had and hear all about it. And thank you for joining me today. Dream wild, wild dreamer. Thanks for joining us for the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen.